Thank you so much, Sheena. You are my hero. You truly are. And from the first time I met you with the Japanese Prime Minister having tea, I just felt immediately what a truly special human being, not to mention professor of not just business but psychology you are. And I'm just truly honored to be introduced by you. And of course, you completely understood why I created the Huffington Post and why out of failure comes something good, which is a message that I write a lot about in Thrive, because it was the message of my mother, to whom the book is dedicated, who used to say to my sister, Agape Stassinopoulos, who is here, and to me, that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone to success. So I'm delighted to be speaking here. We thought we would keep my remarks to sort of the minimum so that we can have a real conversation, which, as Sheena said, is the point of both what's happening online and what I hope will be happening here. So we are also living through this amazing time when two trends are intersecting. One is the recognition that the world, the way we're living it, has become unsustainable, both for women, for men, for businesses, and for polar bears. And we need to change it. And the other trend is the amazing amount of scientific findings that we have now that are validating ancient wisdom about how life is shaped from the inside out, about how we can tap into our own wisdom, and how we can actually improve how businesses, governments, and our own lives are run. So with these two trends intersecting, I also have a third part of the story, which is my own personal journey. And we can all bring our own personal journey into the conversation, because that makes it much more interesting. I start the book with my own personal journey, how on April 6, 2007, I collapsed from exhaustion, burnout, and sleep deprivation. I hit my head on the way down, broke my cheekbone, got 4 stitches on my right eye, and came to, in a pool of blood, asking myself the question, is this success? Because while by conventional definitions of success, I was successful, by any sane definition of success, if you're lying in a full pool of blood on the floor of your office, you're not successful. Can we all agree on that? So that started me, especially as I was going from doctor to doctor and from MRI to echocardiogram to find out if there was something medically wrong with me, you know, a brain tumor, a heart problem. So from doctor to doctor, I kept asking myself these questions, which philosophers have always asked, you know, what is a good life? And I realized that not just in my own life, but all around me, we had actually shrunk the definition of a good life down to 2 metrics of success: money and power, / recognition, fame, etc. And this was an incredibly shrunken view of human existence. And that's what started me wanting to redefine success and launching sections on the Huffington Post to have this conversation. And finally, last year, I gave a commencement at Smith talking about not just telling graduates how to be successful, but telling graduates to just ask themselves the questions of what is it that they actually want, as opposed to how to get what society tells them they want. And that, to my surprise, led to a book. I had promised myself I would not write a 14th book, so it's a bit of a surprise baby I never thought I would have. But it's actually been an amazing journey. And I realized that my higher self, my soul, whatever you think is driving us to make good decisions, has made me do that. Because I was such a hardcore case of a driven workaholic that it wasn't just enough to break my cheekbone and find myself in a pool of blood to start making changes. I now have to be talking about it every day. so that I reinforce the wisdom that I know is actually the only way to live. But what I make clear in the book is that we know what to do. And there is a lot of science now about how to thrive. So what I'm hoping the book will be is a bridge between knowing what to do and actually doing it. So it starts with the recognition of this third metric of success, beyond the first two of money and power. And I see the third metric as consisting of 4 pillars. The first is our well-being and health. Because I know it sounds obvious, but if you look at the statistics, it's like stunning how many people have sacrificed their own health to a kind of driven pursuit of what they consider success. Literally, if you look at the number of people with heart attacks in their 50s and high blood pressure and diabetes coming out of stress, and the fact that 3/4 of our healthcare costs come from preventable chronic stress-related diseases, you realize that we are living under a collective delusion that the only way to succeed is through burnout, sleep deprivation, exhaustion. And I love speaking to students more than anything because you have the opportunity to put an end to this collective delusion early in your life. And the question I get more often than anywhere else, I'm just coming from speaking to the Yale Law School with Amy Chua, which was a fascinating conversation because she wrote The Tiger Mom. And the conversation was billed as strive meets thrive. And we reached the conclusion that, in fact, you can strive, and I'm all in favor of striving, big dreams, accomplishments, hard work, and thrive at the same time, provided you take as good care of yourself as you take of your smartphone. That's all I'm asking. Because you know how your smartphone gives you these alerts that say 20% battery remaining, 17% battery remaining. By about 13% battery remaining, I get really nervous. So I start looking around for recharging shrines, and they're everywhere, you know, in our offices, our homes, airports, just in case my smartphone dies on me. But look at the way we treat ourselves. I mean, when I collapsed, I must have been way below 0 battery remaining, but I didn't even notice. So that's the first metric, health, well-being. All you need to do is take as good a care of yourself as your smartphone. That's it. At the end of each section, I have 3 baby steps that you can start taking right now, because what I care about is little changes as opposed to intellectual agreement. And the first, I'm not going to walk you through all of them, but the first little step at the end of the wisdom chapter, at the end of the well-being chapter, before we move on to wisdom, is unless you're one of the very wise people who get all the sleep they need every night, start by getting 30 minutes more than you're getting now. That's how I went from getting 4 to 5 hours to getting 7 to 8 hours. And truly, sleep is a miracle drug. And I have 55 pages of scientific endnotes to prove it. In fact, if you read all that sleep does, including the latest study about how it allows, like a dishwashing machine, the process through your brain cells to let go of all the waste of the day, which brings mental clarity, which prevents the onset of aging, and even Alzheimer's has now been connected with sleep deprivation. So if you look at all the things that sleep does, you actually are aghast at the fact that our culture has glamorized sleep deprivation. You're actually really outraged at the fact that men, I'm sorry guys, except for those in this room, all the wise men in this room, but other men outside have actually worn sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. I only need 3 hours sleep. I had a dinner with a guy recently who said, you know, I only slept 4 hours the night before. And I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, you know what, if you had slept 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting. And then a lot of you are business students. just look at corporate America, where people are congratulated for working 24/7, which literally is like congratulating somebody for coming to work drunk. So, there's tons of stuff about sleep in the book, including my advice to the graduates at Smith to sleep their way to the top. But moving on to wisdom. You look around and you see incredibly smart leaders in business, media, politics, making terrible decisions. The problem is not their lack of IQ or good degrees, it's lack of wisdom. And we need to really reconnect with our own wisdom, and one of the ways to do that is to disconnect from technology for a certain period of time to reconnect with ourselves. Another way is to recognize that we are not our jobs, that we cannot be defined by our jobs. However magnificent they may be, however successful we may be, we are more than our jobs. And if people began to really believe that, I think our leaders would make very different decisions. Because right now you look around and you see, how come we don't have any gun control measures passed yet? And the reason is that our senators and our members of Congress are terrified that they might lose their jobs. They might be thrown out if they vote against powerful lobbies. And that is like saying that your entire identity is based on this position you're holding. And that's really shrinking who you are as a human being. And a tiny little step that begins this journey of reconnecting with our own wisdom is, at the end of the day, turn off all your devices and gently escort them out of your bedroom. Because if you're charging your smartphones by your bed, you are going to be tempted, if you wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, to look at your data, right? Am I right here? And I know you have multiple excuses, like I need my iPhone to wake me up, right? Well, Pottery Barn, $32, a great-looking vintage alarm clock. I can deal with all the excuses you have. You need to be available to your children / boss / news editor, whatever. Remember the old-fashioned phones that had no data? Get one of those. I have one of those. Give it to anybody who may need to reach you at night. And other than that, just don't let your day life intrude into your night life. You'll wake up so much more renewed and recharged and more likely to make wise decisions. Because, as I quote Bill Clinton saying in the book, the most important mistakes I made in my life, he said, I made when I was tired. He did not specify what mistakes. But I was at the University of Miami last week, and Donna Shalala said, you cannot lead if you are tired. That's how far she went. And she was the longest-running HHS secretary under Clinton, and she said she had to sleep with her briefing books in her bed because Clinton would call her at all hours of the night to ask her recondite questions about Medicare policy, and she needed to have her briefing books there to answer them. But as she said, that wasn't exactly an effective way to run the White House. It's just like chaos. And it's not at all the most effective kind of leadership. The third pillar is wonder. We so often forget to look at the beauty and mystery of ordinary life and the things that we see around us. As I was walking in here, just the beautiful cherry blossom, this amazing campus that you're on. Promise you, 7 years ago, before my collapse, I would not have noticed anything. Either I would have been buried in my smartphone, or I would have been buried in my thoughts. And that's the other thing. Our minds are either looking ahead, worrying about something, Montaigne said there were many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened. Or we would have been looking in the past at all the things we could have done better, judging ourselves. This is the voice that I call in the book the obnoxious roommate living in our heads that constantly doubts us, questions us, judges us. That's why being right now in this moment, our mother used to say, don't miss the moment, is the only place from which to experience the wonder of life. And it's also the only thing we know for sure. At Yale today, a lot of people are talking about the story of Marina Keegan, a brilliant Yale student who graduated 2 years ago and died tragically in a car crash 5 days after her graduation. And her mother pulled all her writings from, sorry, I have a daughter graduating this year, so, pulled all her writings from the hard drive and it was just published now. And reading that, you see, we don't know what life brings. And so often, we bury ourselves in our to-do lists, in our charts, in our plans, and we just forget to actually live. Okay, I'm going to read you something while I collect myself. So T.S. Eliot said that in a beautiful poem that I start the wisdom section with, because it sums up what I'm saying. He wrote, the endless cycle of ideas and action, endless invention, endless experiment, bring knowledge of motion, but not of stillness, knowledge of speech, but not of silence, knowledge of words and ignorance of the word. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? And as we look around and we are buried in data, we see that data does not lead to wisdom. In fact, as Nassim Taleb said, often the more data we have, the more the needle comes in an increasingly big haystack. And the more we need to be really connected with our own wisdom to be able to distinguish the needle from the haystack. So often, and that's why Marina's story is so poignant, we begin to think these thoughts and redefine success and reconsider how we live our lives when something bad happens. A collapse like mine, or something worse, the loss of a loved one. And my hope is that it doesn't have to be that way. That we can actually find different entry points. That the entry point doesn't have to be a tragedy. That the entry point could be a poem. And I've sprinkled a lot of them throughout the book. That the entry point could be an amazing scientific study that tells you beyond any doubt that sleep, meditation, quiet time basically reconnect us with the essence of who we are. That giving, which is the fourth and final pillar, is another shortcut to happiness and meaning. That we are actually wired for giving. And when we do give, not only are we happier, but we find meaning and purpose in life, which otherwise is often lost if we are only focusing on our own career path. And what is wonderful about this time we're living through now is that these two worlds are coexisting, because we're living through a real transition period. I think it's like equivalent to moving from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance. And we're in this period when you can see a lot of examples of the Dark Ages. You can see a lot of examples of people literally committing suicide from stress. In South Korea, 40 people commit suicide a day. In the West, we had all these examples of people in the investment banking industry jumping from high buildings to the point where Goldman Sachs has actually told analysts that they can take weekends off, which was a very radical idea. But at the same time, coexisting with that dark reality, we have the brave new world where more and more businesses are introducing stress reduction practices into their workplace, not because they're necessarily so benevolent, but because of the impact on the bottom line. And I have a lot of these examples in the book, but let me just give you one by Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, the third largest health insurance company in this country. Again, he had a rough wake-up call. He broke his neck while skiing. He spent a year hooked on narcotics. And then he discovered what he calls his cocktail: meditation, yoga, and acupuncture. And it so transformed his ability to function that he made it available as a free benefit to his 49,000 employees. And then he brought in Duke University to study the results, and they found a 7% reduction in healthcare costs and a 69-minute-a-day improvement in productivity. So now, why I think this shift is going to accelerate is because the evidence is so overwhelming. The data we're collecting is so clear that the way we've been running businesses and running our lives is not working. And also, if you look at memorial services, I don't want to be morbid, but I was recently at a friend's memorial service, and listening to the eulogy, I thought to myself, our eulogies have nothing to do with our resumes. Have you ever listened to anybody say in a eulogy, George was amazing. He increased market share by 1/3. So why is it that we are sometimes entirely absorbed in things that improve our resumes and not things that are about all the other stuff that our eulogies are going to be about? How we made people feel, what made us laugh, small kindnesses, lifelong passions. So this is the tipping point where when we realize that if we're lucky, we have 30,000 days to live and play the game of life. And how we play it is going to depend on what we value. And if we only value money or power, we are never going to have enough of either. Because we're always going to be moving into comparisons, right? There is always somebody who has more. And it's only when we begin to also value the third metric of life that we actually begin to fully live. And I just want to end by saying that the world keeps sending signals and flashing lights to tell us to climb the ladder, make more money. It's all about that. And there are no worldly signals about reconnecting with our own essence, reaching out to people who need help, appreciating the beauty and the mystery of life. There are no worldly signals about that, so we have to create them ourselves. We have to create our own daily rituals, and we have to create our own little tribe, our own little support group. It can be of one, it can be of more, but on the same journey, supporting each other. And then we are going to have the wind on our back, because I really believe the shift is happening. I mean, I see it everywhere. And I think it's happening particularly with the young generation, because I know from my daughters, they don't want to live like me. Mommy, I love you, but I don't want to do my life like yours. And we see that again and again. And they also are beginning to realize that they don't need to do that in order to succeed, even by purely worldly terms. And that is really what is so wonderful. And I can tell you an endless amount of stories about that. And as I'm traveling around the country, I mean, the one lesson that I'm taking away is that it's worse than I thought. I was speaking to 500 women lawyers in Austin on Friday, and as I was signing books, lawyer after lawyer would say to me something equivalent to, as one of them put it, I don't remember the last time I was not tired. A woman actually pulled her bangs and showed me a Band-Aid of where she had collapsed from exhaustion. And I thought, what are we doing to ourselves? And ironically, that's why so many women then give up their jobs. They burn out and they actually leave altogether. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm really happy that you're here to discuss this idea so that we can all collectively say, enough, there is another way. Thank you.